I'm very happy to welcome as well our other 1 month fellow for this month, Professor Silvia ROMANI from the University of Milan, who will be speaking about being angry women in ancient mythology, a gender pathographic approach. So thank you so much for joining us, and please feel free to share your screen now.
Very quickly, thank you so much. I really appreciate. I'm grateful to have this wonderful opportunity to share with you my ideas, and I'm sure that this conversation is going to be very, very helpful for help me writing my paper at the end of the month. So I'm going straight to the point, jumping my self-portrait academic, and go to the scenario. As a matter of fact, over the past decade or so, scholars working on the ancient Mediterranean civilization, specifically on ancient Greek and Roman cultures, have witnesses, in a way, a marked increase in the interest in the study of emotions, a development that, to me, may be seen as an out of fashion, in a way, fascination for neurosciences. One of the main issues raised by this recent and really enthusiastic interest in the imagery of emotions in antiquity is, in a way, a non-congruence of dossier. It emerged as a salient concern, in a way. To illustrate this point, just consider the imagery of emotions in ancient Greece, and let apart the Roman problem. A real ontological turn occurred between the end of the Mycenaean period and the beginning of a geometrical one. In the representation of human emotions, it is almost impossible to speak of emotions in antiquity within the Homeric epic, for example, Homeric epic corpus, in the same way as we speak of emotion through reading the great tragedy of 5th century BCE. Another noteworthy element to me is the significant paucity of information regarding entire groups of emotion, which are of considerable interest, importance in contemporary times. This is particularly evident, for example, in the case of depression, for which the Greek and Latin imagery provides indications that are too episodic to be analyzed in depth. This phenomenon pertains to a multitude of reasons which are beyond the scope of my discussion today. However, to me, a salient premise emerges. Emotions that predominantly concern the inner self of the individual remain in antiquity a largely unexplored domain until the classical era, at least better until the 4th century BCE. Conversely, the case of emotions pertaining to the externalized, the so-called externalized self is different. These emotions involve the projection of the individual beyond themselves, thereby stabilizing a relationship with others. It's what we call the vers le dehors self, quoting a meaningful definition by Jean-Pierre Vernat. It's therefore easy to say how much more productive it's to investigate emotions that have always been externalized, that are very powerful, kinetic, such as those linked to eros in the positive, anger, rage in the negative. Another non-marginal question to me is what I mean when I use a specific word. In recent years, some researchers into anger have set out to perform cross-cultural research without considering that likely the concepts used by their non-Anglophone subjects do not correspond neatly with those that prevail in English. And as far as antiquity is concerned, not to mention that the concept used in contemporary times do not correspond with the ancient Greek and Roman ones. If it's the case, I can return to issue related to the definition and use of the language late in the question and answer session. Just a single definition, really two definitions by Aristotle. Aristotle offered a definition which was subsequently adapted by many others. Orge, ira, rage, is the desire accompanied by pain for perceiving revenge for some perceived slight to oneself or one's own, the slight not having been deserved. In antiquity, of course, a desire for appropriate revenge or for a vengeful punishment was in the eye of most people entirely respectable, even obligatory, and not a cause for embarrassment at all. Earlier in the rhetoric, Aristotle had explained that no one is angry with those whom vengeance clearly cannot overtake, or those who are far more powerful than he is. So, in this specific framework, consequently, if you are a woman, you cannot be angry at anyone in antiquity, since no one, with the exception of slaves and children, are less powerful than you are. Go straight to gender and anger in antiquity. In the imagination of Greek and Roman males, women, like animals, barbarians, and children, are especially susceptible to anger. It is emphatically not a stereotype that is confined to the famous misogynistic writers, such as Simonides of Amorgos, 7th century BC, or Juvenal, 1st, 2nd century AD. But it's virtually pandemic from Homer on. Just as women were liable to give into other passions and appetites, so they easily surrendered to the angry emotions, and their anger was seldom, if ever, justified. In this scenario, the one I briefly described, my aim is to investigate the imagery of anger, of female rage in Greek and Roman antiquity. This comes with another important issue. What about the gender, or better, what about the gender in antiquity? This question is really too complex to fit into today's presentation for me, but it's a real central concern in my research in the recent years. Taking for granted, please, the legitimacy of my choice with regard to my research corpus, when you call into question a dossier of text that can be located within the so-called Western culture tradition, the risk is to be perceived as antiquated. And when you come to the issue as how could I draw a connection between antiquity to contemporaneity, the risk is your effort be perceived as a research for the origins. This is very important to me. It's not. To me, it's not. And I also not assume or hope for an identification between the emotional imagery of women of ancient myth with that of contemporary ones. On the other hand, I am of the opinion that ancient dossiers, particularly those incorporating mythical narrative and their visual and literal representations, can serve as a laboratory, bon à penser. In my case, bon à penser the depictions of female emotions, especially anger and rage. I therefore consider ancient representations of emotions as a kind of reagent, a reflexive reagent for the contemporaneity. This is not identification between ancient emotions and contemporary ones. Instead, is a kind of acknowledgement of a polarity that deserves to be considered as a whole. The preliminary question is to identify the specific characteristic of female rage through its literary and visual representation, not forgetting the historical stratification of language and styles of artistic representation. What then are the specific characteristics of female anger, of female rage in the representation of ancient imagery? On what occasion would ancient women get angry? If so, under what conditions, with what emergence of reactions. As a consequence, what is the relationship between the legitimacy of the expression of anger and ultimately, what is the relationship between anger and forgiveness? On this front, the contemporary debate is very rich and intense. Let us think of the provocative challenges by the philosopher Agnes Collard and replied by, for example, Martha Nussbaum. The last issue for today, the main one, is the identification and description of the representation of a monstrous feminine. For this 1 month writing and residence period, I will focus specifically on this last issue, the monstrification of race and the well-known case of Medusa. Here you have some iconic and very ancient representation of Medusa from the 2nd millennium BCE on. As a mythological artifact, the myth of Medusa itself, to me, perfectly illustrates what I am trying to sum up. Because in the mythological narrative, Medusa is a beautiful girl, and she is raped by the sea god Neptunus in a temple of Minerva. As a punishment, the goddess, a female goddess, I like to stress, transforms Medusa into a monster. This is recounted by Ovid in his poem, The Metamorphosis. Still on ancient Greek myth page, the case of Medusa is also interesting because within the mythical narrative, Medusa is decapitated by Perseus and thus killed and turned into a trophy. This happens exactly because, unlike her two sisters, Medusa is weaker, not stronger than the others. She alone among the three sisters is mortal. Medusa does not exist narratively before she is raped by Neptunus and then defeated and reduced to a pure head. As a head, then, after losing her body that originally had very beautiful female human resemblance, she becomes the emblem of fury and vengeance. She becomes a phenomenon to be investigated when her outer self arises in a way in her head taken off. She's dangerous only and because she becomes an instrument of male vengeance. When she loses her history and her female body, symbolically already annihilated by the rape, Medusa acquires an agency as an object. She becomes an apotropic instrument of defense, a magical tool for offense and defense, a trophy on the shield of a hero or a god, a head raised high by Perseus. The evocation of Medusa's head is then also the sign of a female defeat. For the contemporary times, to me, a very good and amusing case of study is that of Hillary Clinton during the first winning Donald Trump presidential campaign, 2016, one image kept appearing those days, and it was that of Hillary Clinton as a snake-haired monster. Writer like Pollack, a blogger like Russell, have compared Clinton to Medusa. Her monstrous image was a trend on political merchandise sold online. Now, to me, Hillary Clinton as Medusa would have no symbolic efficacy in the absence of the other indispensable element of the story from ancient narrative onwards, her slayer, her rival, Donald Trump, who has been mass portrayed as the Greek semigod Perseus. On Zazzle, people can buy products emblazoned with an image of a stoic Trump raising the head of a petrified Clinton, an evident allusion to the sculpture by Benvenuto Cellini. So the message is apparently only effective if addressed to an audience that is familiar with the myth of Medusa and Perseus and had at some point, in whatever form, crossed path with the image of Selene bronze. But in fact, the allusion is clear. The message to me is powerful regardless of the cultural background of the audience, because conveys a narrative and representation of the feminine that could not be clearer. The female figure monsterized by rage and also, in Hillary Clinton's case, by ambition, this monster is destined to be defeated, decapitated of her femininity and her power. Paradoxically enough to me, the real Hillary Clinton is read by the media as incapable of convincingly expressing anger and therefore as a non-credible candidate. The rhetorical debate during the 2016 election ball game was imbued by anger. From the start, Donald Trump was really angry. Trump told CNN, "I'm angry. As far as I'm concerned, anger is okay. Anger and energy is what this country needs." It's like the rage of Achilles at the beginning of the Iliad, a kind of primordial energy, not always connected to rage, but always to masculinity. Some days later, Clinton herself got into the act. "A lot of people are not worried and frustrated," she said. "They are angry, and I am angry too." But somehow Clinton couldn't persuade people that she was furious in the same way as Trump. The case of Hillary Clinton is certainly not an isolated one, as Elizabeth Johnson argued in a 2016 article with the significant title, "The Original Nasty Woman." Have a few minutes, do a Google image search, type in a famous woman's name and the word Medusa, and you will see. This is much about the nexus of women's political ambition and monstrosity, but much more interesting is to me the specific nexus of women's anger and public life. The reappropriation of Medusa as an iconic feminine within a feminine, if not feminist debate, is not entirely a solved problem, even not unknown to the political and cultural debate, as shown, for example, by the case of Hélène Cixous or Sylvia Plath, who have made Medusa their iconic muse. In any case, this process is the result of a continuous renegotiation between the legitimate desire to affirm rage and the risk of the monstrous, of the loss of the beauty, actually. The monstrification of female rage, as in the case of Medusa demonstrates, brings with it a final issue for today, perhaps in some way preliminary one, or maybe two issues covered by one. Is Medusa beautiful? Do I have to be nice while I'm angry? A partial response is for example, the iconic representation of Rihanna as Medusa on the cover of GQ USA by Damien Hirst. She's a sexy, provocative monster, furious for sure, but below the line, portrayed by a male artist in any case. Or you can have a reversal of perspective. And here we can quote Medusa with the head of Perseus, a statue by Luciano Garbati, 2008, a work exhibited as a replica in 2020-2021 at the Colette Pond Park in front of the courtyard where Weinstein was on trial for sexual harassment. The relationship between beauty and monstrosity and the legitimation legitimization of anger at the expense or despite the possible loss of beauty is a very strong issue in contemporary debate. Just to quote two of the most influential and successful authors of the last 10 years, we can quote Soraya Kemali or Rebecca Strainster, who reflect on the political and social function of rage and on the codes of visual representation of female rage. They talk about the aesthetic of rage. So to close with this brief presentation, a question erupts in the discussion. Rage is beauty or is not? That question sounds like a formal, the answer, the question sounds like a formal liberation or freedom even. Rage is beauty, yes, but if it's not, I don't care if you like it, says Rebecca Strainster. We have to destroy the parallel, the binomial angry women, ugly women, as Soraya Kemali states. Or we have to remember that there are many types of anger that are not bad, Misha Cherry, or at the end, anger at injustice regarding it as a wholly appropriate response, is a wholly appropriate response to inequity. Thank you so much. Here you have a brief, some essentials from the point of view of bibliography, but I interrupt the... Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. That, yes, was very interesting. Any questions?
Well, thank you, Silvia.
Yes.
I'm smiling because this is such a wonderful topic of great relevance to another very important area that some of us are working on, which is grievance redressal by women in courts in India. This has a sort of a manifestation in terms of access to justice, and we discovered that a lot of women don't often go to courts; they're not complainants. And we tried to set about, this is an experiment that we ran with Enrique Fatas, who was actually a fellow here, and Luis, to discover that there are norms against women complaining and how they punish women who complain and express anger, and how, when that norm gets exercised, it lowers the likelihood of women actually taking their cases to courts of law. But I thought I should...
Thank you, Pavan.
There's a wonderful connection between your work and the consequences that we identify in terms of access to justice. Thank you. Thanks, Silvia. I really enjoyed your...
Thank you, Pavan. If I can add something, it's really interesting to me that ancient female characters from mythology, when they have access to the possibility of revenge, they never complain or feel regret. As, I don't know, for example, Clytemnestra or Medea, we were talking about a lunch. No one feel any regret for having had the possibility to punish, to have their revenge.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Pavel, next.
Hello. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Hear you? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Hello. Yes. Thank you very much for the very interesting talk and very interesting subject about the rage, the emotions in ancient world. And I find it very interesting approach and very promising. And so being archaeology working in those, maybe have a little more suggestions about, a little some ideas for comparison about the iconography of Medusa, which is actually apotropaion, yeah, which looks the ugly face in full front,
Yeah.
And so I think this is one of the main features. So for one side, we have it continuing over the Middle Ages. Yeah. So for example, the so-called zmijevik, the apotropeon of the face with snakes from the head. It's quite common in, for example, 11th century Novgorod of Russia. Yeah, and on the other side, yeah, there are quite similar images in Oriental art. So, for example, we can pick up the Indian rendering of Kirtimukha or Kala or Mukha, who is also rendered quite similarly. So when we discover it archaeologically, not a very good example, we cannot distinguish what is there. But it's not a woman head. It's not even a human. It's a head of a lion. Yeah, who is just angry because he doesn't have a body, and so he cannot feed his stomach. That's why he is angry. He's angry looking in front of. Well, here we can trace some relation between Greece and Greek and Indian art because of Hellenistic traditions and Arab and so on. But we have some similar depictions, perhaps of males in 5th century Scythian burials in southern Siberia, in Pazyryk, yeah, where this connection is not really thinkable. So in this case, I just wonder what is the source and what is its realization. So what is, so is this apotropeon with a face looking Bessos in Egypt, for example? Was it primary and then some legend was ascribed to that? Or it was a legend which was iconographied, which was rendered iconographically as Medusa? So this is one of the questions which I cannot answer myself, but I'm very interested to think about this matter. So thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Pavel. This is very interesting to me because I had no time to emphasize the relationship between the head of Medusa and her body, because we have a lot of artistic representation where you can find, of course, only the head, and you are sure that the head stands for something else. For example, a vagina, in a way. In any case, it is carrying. And then you have some very ancient representation with Medusa is a single. She has a head and 2, 3, 4 legs, and she's running. So she's doing what? This is not clear. And as far as the relationship between ritual, representation, and mythography, this is the most important and pivotal question of my field of research. And we have no answer right now. Sometimes is in a way, sometimes is in the other way. But of the Medusa case, I like that you can work on Medusa from the narrative point of view, but then you have to face the simple fact that she becomes an object of revenge and rage. And as an object, it's not the female revenge side of the problem, is a male one. She's a revenge tool, a pathographic tool for revenge, for offense, when she is raised by Perseus as an head or by Donald Trump as a head. But she's not a female character, and no more after the decapitation. Thank you so much, Pavel. Thank you.
Wonderful. I think we had Pierre. I don't see your hand anymore up, but
yes, thank you, Paulius and Silvia, for your presentation. I have one question about your project, because when I listen to you, I am wondering, when studying emotions in the ancient world, how do you do to avoid some major problems? I think particularly in 2 big issues. The first one is anachronism or presentism. treating all representations from the angle of contemporary interpretations. No, like the first problem I'm seeing, and the second one is ethnocentrism. You talk about it
Sure.
uh,
Yeah.
already, when you can interpret the cultural meanings of other culture or civilizations without taking into account their own specificities. Also, how do you do to avoid these kind of problems? Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. These are the most important questions nowadays, not only for me, but for my field of studies. We have a lot of works published on the problem of the imagery of emotions in antiquity. As I'm in front of some archaeologists in my actual audience, I can say that another, to me, very, very big problem is to stress so much the archaeological dossier, trying to ask something they cannot say in response. I mean, if you work on archaeology and emotions, or a epigraphical source and emotion, you are in danger, because it's really too much to me. But I don't know if I was or I'm able to skip or avoid or face the problem, the issue you were putting now. But I think that you can also say that it's useful to grasp from the ancient Greek and Roman sources, not, a perfect parallel, not a genetic correspondence from antiquity to modernity to contemporary, from Greek and Roman landscape, ancient landscape, and the contemporary ones. But you can search some questions from antiquity to put some answer, to put a question to the contemporaneity, not trying to create identities, but questions. So, for example, why in antiquity, in Greek and Roman antiquity, I couldn't say anything about that, but why is there such a discrepancy between the way in which a rage female woman is represented in literary sources and in the visual representations? Because there is a lot of difference. For example, if you talk about Clytemnestra, Lyssa, who actually is the deity of fury and vendetta, or Erinis, who are demons of revenge and anger, they are always represented in literary sources as dog, as ugly dogs, as smelling wolves, really bad, I mean. But if you go to the ancient pottery representation, you have some beautiful girls, always well dressed, with beautiful hairs, and they are, for example, killing a person. They are destroying. In Greek, we have this word very impressive that is sparagmos. When you take the body of the person and you spread every single limbs apart. So this problem, to me, is very interesting also for the contemporary. And at the same time, the binomial between ugliness and beauty when we come to the representation of female rage. this is to me a very productive question. How can we? This is very strong in the antiquity, but it's the same in the contemporaneity. Not the same answer, but the same question to me. But thank you. For sure, this is the main problem. You're right.
Great. And Ben.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. I think it's such wonderful and fascinating research. And I think, yes, I think this kind of cross-cultural approaches to understanding the emotions, which in anthropology is an established field, it can yield really interesting results, with respect to the possibilities for opening up new questions about the present moment, for example. And I just had a question about this relationship between the visual and the textual you mentioned. So, many of the the beautiful, striking and powerful images that you showed throughout the presentation. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more of the context in which these particular images were, perhaps these particular objects, images were created and then intended to be used, because perhaps I wonder whether something about emotion kind of can be linked to the desire for, I guess, affecting a viewer in the case of the visual, drawing out an emotion, so to speak. So it raises another set of questions, I guess, in relation to the visual, both in the context. So, and of course, if we stay true to the anthropological perspective, within the context that they were produced and then used and circulated. And I wonder whether that might give a sense of a way in which, the possibility of this particular form of anger, if we call it anger, which of course is an English word, it has meaning, outside of what we mean, but speaks to the possibility of transformation as a kind of power. And I wondered whether you had anything maybe to say about this, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben. Very, very meaningful questions. First of all, when you go to the artistic representation, you have too many. You have to go to ancient Greek pottery in general, but then you can find either representation of the head of Medusa, either representation or representation of female characters taking revenge or really angry, for example. For the first kind of representation, it's very interesting because you can have Medusa, pure head, on the shields. For example, in the representation of the goddess Athena or Zeus, you can have the head of Medusa at the center, at the epicema of the shield, or as far as Zeus is concerned, in the center of on the center of his mantle. And but you can also find Medusa on the bottom of the cups, of the drinking cups. In this case, it means that because in the culture of the banquet in antiquity, you are supposed to drink, yes, but never be drunk, never get drunk. Because Greek and Roman people, they thought that to drink is to be really close to death. So the head of Medusa, the bottom of the cup, reminds you that you cannot drink all your cup, because otherwise you are going to see in front of you, to face as a mirror, not your face, but the head of Medusa. So you are going to be petrified and you are going to die. So is in a way apotropaic, but in reality is this an alert. You cannot do that. As far as the ancient representation of women angry, you can find them on the pottery vase, red figure cups from ancient Greece and something from Rome. And this is always the representation of the very moment in which the female character is taking revenge. And there you don't have a head, because in this case, they are still women. You have these beautiful women that try to, I don't know, destroy a man, take someone up in small pieces, or using sword on your husband, but with a beautiful dress in an idyllic scenery, but they are killing someone. These are the two. As far as your second question, can you remind me, Ben, excuse me, what you were suggesting as your last question?
I think that helps me to, yeah, that's fantastic. But I was thinking about the possibility of transformation. And its relationship to a kind of power. But I know we're maybe short on time, so happy to you talk about it later. Thank you.
Yeah, later. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yes, indeed, that's the time we have for today. Thank you so much, Silvia and everyone.